put it in the unallocated area. We did do a report to council regarding that in the spring. Now, where we did, so with the Bill 148 that came out, we did a high-level estimate at the November 23rd budget meeting, and that estimate was specifically to the student wages, $125,000. There was another estimate made, perhaps Mr. Sluchenkov could correct me if I'm wrong, about the fair wage part of it, where if you're a part-timer, you should be getting the same wage as the full-time if you're doing the same work. So that also was incorporated into our 2018 budget document, and it was a total of about approximately $225,000 that was the budget impact with those two items put together. Now, specifically to the student wages, we incorporated in the 2018 budget document, which was handed out last Tuesday, $125,000, because that was the amount that we knew at that point, because this report hasn't gone to council yet. So at the time of print, that's what we put in the budget document, and we put it under the unallocated area because we didn't know which areas would be getting the adjustments versus the other ones. So we put it as an aggregate amount in the unallocated area in order to be in order to incorporate it in the budget deliberations. Now that we have this report before council, and whatever decision council makes, if you go with staff recommendation option 2, that $125,000 is reduced by $89,200, and we will make that adjustment on the first day of the budget deliberations next week.
Okay, so thank you for that. Through the mayor to you, I'm calculating out $1.5 million worth of student expenses. If you add the 125, you're saying reduce that down by 90, so it'll be actually like 142?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, sorry, I meant to answer that part of the question as well. There's so many parts of that question I lost track, and I apologize. So in the report, the calculations that were made were based on 2017 actuals in student recruitment that Norfolk County did. And we got those percentages from there based on what we actually did in 2017. The amount of students that have been budgeted for 2018 is in the chart under finance comments at 1.226600. So that is the actual dollars budgeted for 2018. So if we take the percentage changes from each option, so for option 2, for example, it's 2.92% percentage increase, then the percentage increase based on the budgeted amounts is 35,800. So the difference between 35,800 and the 125 is the approximately 90,000.
Yeah, I get all that, but we're still, I don't feel that we're getting a true comparator. If you spent $1.38 million, and you know you've spent that, you could pick a budget of $1. It doesn't mean you're going to come within it, and we're not. I know in 2016 we were minus $3 million on the levy, and this is why. These kind of things, it's not why, but this is how you end up in this position when you come under budget to a number that won't work. And that's how I see this report coming. We know we're going to spend $1.4 million, yet our budget's 1.2, and we're going to use gapping dollars to move it all around and drop a service here, and that's where municipalities have gapping policies to not allow that kind of thing to happen, and it skews different departments as well. If all of a sudden Public Works can come in under budget because they're gapping dollars into unallocated expenses, and you're not getting a true labor cost. I don't think we're saving anything, and it says we're saving money. I can't see it. We're not even making our budget compared to actual, so I don't know, the new math, I guess.
Well, if I may, the overall picture is that I read from this is from one year to the next, we're not saving any money. We're increasing the cost for our summer students. Instead of increasing it $125,000 over last year, we're increasing it to $35,800. So we're not saving any money over last year, but by doing option 2, I think what the report is saying is that it is reduced from what was in that binder, and what we had we not got this report, we very well may be doing 125 increase. Is that a fair statement, James? That's the way I read it. And I agree, it's not a savings over 2017, it's an increase, but it's a savings from the original that we discussed back in November. Is that fair, James, way of putting it? I don't know.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, that's a fair statement.
Okay. Yeah, it's not really a savings over last year, that's true. I have the next speakers, Council Oliver, then Brunton and Columbus.
Very much, Mr. Mayor. My question relates to the first page of the report on page 83 of our agenda. And Mr. Mayor, I think my name is on the motion to approve the recommendation in the report, so I'm coming at this from that perspective. I think this was a good compromise. I appreciated staff giving us the options, and the one that they've suggested I think is as fair as we can be, and yet at the same time trying to be fiscally responsible. My question, right in that paragraph under analysis, of those 147, and I agree with my colleague, that's a lot of students. We provide a lot of meaningful student employment. Last year, 102 of those were paid under $14 an hour, which quite honestly sort of surprised me that many were under 14 bucks an hour, because I presume we don't employ anyone under 16 years of age. Is that correct?
Sorry, there may be an exception with respect to the student tobacco inspectors who attempt to go and purchase cigarettes from corner stores. So in that instance, so there may be one exception, but broadly speaking, your assumption is correct.
And I would have assumed, I hadn't thought of it like that, but I understand that. So for 16-year-olds, whether they're senior high school or even getting ready for the post-secondary school, in some cases, even at $14 an hour, it's not a high wage. Yeah, I was just saying that if these are 16 and over who are either senior high school or planning to go into post-secondary education, even at $14 an hour, it's not a high wage. And I think we can, in good conscience, go ahead and approve this recommendation. It doesn't help those that are above that milestone, but it certainly will help that majority of our students, 102 out of 147, who are below that milestone level.
Thank you, Councillor Brunton.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. I'm not sure. I understand option 2 here on page 85. My question through you is to James. The 1.422, and then over when I flip it over on page 86, option 2 becomes 1.226 plus 35.8 if we follow that scenario. Am I correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Brunton. So, yes, so what option 2 does is it takes the 2017 actual expenditures for part-time employees.
Yep.
And then converts that if they were to make the increased wages, and that's a 2.92% difference. So we took that 2.92% and applied it to the 2018 original budget of the 1.2 million in order to get that 30.
So it becomes one. What is the actual number? Give me that number that if we adopt option 2.
If council were to adopt option 2, the original budget of $1.2 million at the existing minimum wage amounts would increase by $35,800 to bring it up to the $14 an hour for the and that will be presented at the, next week at the 2018 budget deliberations. So you take the 1.226600 and you add the 35,800 to it, and that's what will be presented next week.
Okay, now my question to you is, based on the budget where it sits now, I'm trying to 7 point whatever percent. What is 1% on that budget?
1% is approximately 800,000.
800,000. So this total program is not far off 2%, not far off, correct? Well, 1.5, maybe 1.75% of our,
Yeah,
that's safe to say?
that's safe to say, yes.
I guess my question through you to whoever, have you given any consideration to I was shocked at the number of students. I really am. and I wonder, have you given any thought on a reduction? Or look seriously at the number of students we hire? Can somebody answer that question?
Mr. Cridlin? Sorry, Mr. Cripps? You're that
Pretty close.
Just Mr. Cripps. I'm getting old.
Student employment is by far and away the most efficient manner we have of delivering services in the summer months. We do not have a less expensive way to mow the lawns, to operate Parks and Rec, any number of programs. Beyond that, and this is the critical piece, we use students to fill in the roles of our full-time staff who take the majority of their vacation time in the summer, as do most human beings in this province and in this country. And at $14 an hour, while learning and through mature, nuanced, ongoing stable relations with our collective agreement partners, they allow for students to do work that is otherwise covered by a collective agreement, which the law would otherwise not allow to be done by anyone who's not a member of that collective, not covered by that collective agreement. So students provide coverage so that staff who earn higher full-time wages can take their vacation times or during those 2, 3, 4 months, depending as the case may be. It is, in its totality, an exceptionally efficient model. Your only realistic choice is to hire more permanent part-time people or more full-time persons to provide those various other services. So this is highly efficient. They're not additional baubles. We do not hire any students to simply sit still and watch paint dry. All of them provide valued, important public services, whatever those may be, from operating our marinas, where at the moment we have one full-time staff member, which sometimes goes up to a second for brief periods of time, and everyone else there is a student between 2 whole marinas. So that would be the last thing I would advise against, is trying to reduce our least expensive labor force to replace it with people who are only far more expensive. Okay.
Well, I understand that part of it, Mr. Cribbs, but I am quite familiar with how operations work in the summer and so forth. There are contracts for grass cutting, and we don't need to use ours, or we don't need to have the equipment to do it when it sits 70% of the year, a lawnmower, when you only need it in the summer. So there are other ways of doing the work. But anyways, the simple question was, have you considered and looked seriously at any possibility of reducing the number? I'm just asking that question. I don't need the rationale. I just want to know if you have seriously looked at it by department. Because I do see the ad when it comes out in the summer, and I know every department, and I know there's summer programs, but how does it compare to the year before or the year before that? Are we going up in numbers? Are we coming down in numbers? Can somebody give me the answer to that question?
Oops. At the senior SLT discussions, we look at our labor force, which has included students, and we have made amendments and adjustments since I've been here to the proposals, which you see in the budget documents we provided to you with respect to staffing, and at most we have had multiple discussions around students. The key thing to keep in mind is that Norfolk County happily grew last year. And when you add 1.5% to 2% on your population, what that translates into an organization with about 780 people means increased demand. And so 1% of 780 is roughly 7.8 people, if you hold that true to keep your service level constant. The easiest way to fill just constant small increase in demand spread across this corporation is through the use of students, in this case particularly seasonally. They are by far and away our most efficient response to increases in demand that aren't enough to warrant an entire new staff member, but do need additional service. Student is just a perfect outcome. It provides valuable educational work opportunities. It's future employment and retention. For us, it's succession management, and at $14 an hour, historically less than that, it's a relatively low-cost way for us to do that.
Well, I'm going to ask my question again. Have the departments seriously looked at reductions? You gave me a bunch of scenarios. I'm asking them if the departments have looked at reductions.
I
Yes
will
or no?
reiterate my answer then, and my opening words, sir, were yes, we've looked at that very aggressively at budget, and we've had multiple conversations involving students.
Okay, so the number of students, 147 planned for this year. Can somebody tell me how many we hired last year?
Do you know that information, Mr.
Is there a
Slichenko?
number?
So the 147 were the actuals for 17. There's no planned increase in the number of students. So it's keeping the same amount of students that we had the
Thank
the
you.
previous year.
And my other question is, when does the ad come out for these students? I know it usually runs a page in the paper and it identifies all the different areas where you need them. When will that be coming out?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, February 1st is the date that historically has gone out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I have Councillor Columbus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too was going to question whether we needed that many students, and the county manager answered it very well and outlined why we need them. So I will bypass that. But a question for Aaron. With the selection of option 2, do you believe that there will be no problem filling these positions, these student positions? Councillor Oliver mentioned that he thought that the wage actually was on the low side. So do you think, in comparison to other employers, will there be any problem filling these positions at a 2.92% increase?
Through the mayor, historically, we've not had any issues hiring students within this municipality.
Thank you. Councillor Sonnenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've all heard this criticism of this increase in the minimum wage. It's all well and good to go from $11.50 or $12 to $14. That's great. Everybody's making more money. But now those who were making $14 are saying, hey, I'm worth more than this guy who's just moved up to 14. I've seen it in my own business. I have full-time employees and part-time. The full-timers are saying, hey, I'm not making much more now than the part-timer. That's really not right. I'm wondering if we foresee any repercussions or any pushback in that regard throughout the corporation. With this increase in minimum wage, those who are already making over 14 are going to want more. Do we have any way of knowing, or would we just be guessing? Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council. I think that's when you're talking about wage compression issues, and if you recall, the presentation that I gave during the special budget driver presentation identified the minimum wage piece, but also spoke about, I think what you're talking about is the impact that has on the rest of the band. So you're very correct in terms of in describing what the concept of compression means is essentially when you're bringing up the lowest paid workers, and in this case, the most common situations, those are the lower skilled jobs that require less education, less experience. And when you bring that bottom up, you bring them much closer to those wage rates where there's individuals with more education, more experience, where there could be issues and people feeling disgruntled by being so close to the minimum wage. And quite honestly, I can't provide a fulsome answer and look into the future about exactly what's going to look like, what that's going to look like from be it a collective bargaining perspective or contract negotiations one-on-one. It's something that we're very much alive to and something we're looking at, and something I think you see some sort of articles in the newspapers about both private and public sector employers looking at and having concerns about sort of the cascading impact, since that it's not just the impact on the minimum wage. I'm not sure if that, but at this point in time, it's obviously something we're looking at. There's pay equity specialists whose entire professional sort of expertise is in understanding the impact. So it's something we're alive to and we're looking at on an ongoing basis.
Thank you. Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Mayor, I will be supporting the recommendation when it gets on the floor. The only comment I want to make, I think this is the first time that I've ever disagreed with Councillor Oliver. He suggested that $14 was not very much money. I'm suggesting that up until this minimum wage came into being, there were many families who would have been glad to earn $14 an hour. These are students. They are not family members necessarily who have to support a family, and they'll be earning the same amount as a family member with other dependents. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You, Councillor Height?
Thank you, Mayor Luke. If I could draw your attention to page 86 up at the top, we have the options 1, 2, and 3. I'm looking at option 3, and it actually has the lowest percentage levy impact. So why wouldn't we go with that? There's a savings to be had. I'm not even sure with all these figures, if that's what you want to call them in this particular report, but geez, we could probably save $500,000 out of this one if we go with option 3. I'm not sure. What are the results as far as the money goes?
Mr. Cribbs?
At some point, I'm going to ask, in fact, when I'm done answering, I'd like to encourage either Mr. Sluchenkov or any other general managers present, particularly Mr. Cridland, I think, to speak up with their own specific examples. But the main difference here between 3 and 2 comes from the other persons who are currently, it's a small number, who earn more than 14, right, it's roughly 35 people, but those are students with, amongst other things, with supervisory capacity. So I work at the marina, I'm in charge of 8 other students, they're making $14 an hour, it's hard for me to make only $14 an hour. I'm the head lifeguard at the pool in Delhi, the lifeguards are not earning $14 an hour, I might add, but also I'm responsible for them. So these are our, I'm going to use the term management students, but that's just me inventing that right now. Perhaps we have some better wording to describe that. But that option would wipe out those distinctions. And we know from experience elsewhere in our corporation that when we have compression, wage compression, we have certainly serious morale issues. But it does beg the question, why on earth you'd ever try to work your way up if you had to take extra responsibility for the exact same pay? I mean, I can make a serious argument against doing that. And so that's what that would do for a number of positions. If we have specific, very good examples, I'd ask any of my GMs our GMs to speak now or forever hold the peace.
The item I'd like to add, and I think it's identified in the report, and I do have some concerns about this, because when we did go to look at what our municipal comparators are doing, there is a continued existing in differentiation, and bands are still existing. So as an example, the report identifies specifically Haldeman County of having a percentage calculation that basically says a student level, 1 is the minimum wage, a student level 2 is 20% more, a student level 3 is 60% more. So in as much as the previous answer was that we don't anticipate concerns surrounding hiring, we also don't want to erode completely the bands, because at that point in time, we're dissimilar from our municipal comparators. I don't know to what extent that will create problems for us, but that's arguably when you can experience those problems, when the other municipalities are offering those different gradations, and students, they do come back and they do provide additional skill set, and we do then bring them back in supervisory capacities. And I think that the report also identifies some of the roles that distinguish them from just sort of your basic first year student that's coming in, doing whatever that work looks like. And that's why the evaluation tool in 2015 was also used as to evaluate that work, and it's not the same every single time. So just the municipal comparator piece gives me some concern and pause as well.
I'm quite familiar with the labor grade and the wage compression, and I received a call this morning from a supervisor who will actually be making $1.50 more an hour than all of her underlings. She wasn't very happy about that. That's not my question. My question was, how much money will we save if we choose option 3? I see option 2 has the figure of $89,200. I'm looking for option 3.
My guess is around 95,000, rough numbers.
And that's still not going to take us into the actuals, is that correct? Without those gappings? Because we know that our cost is $1.38 million. That's what it cost us last year.
Correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Just that we'll be back here again, well, whoever's back here, next year I'll have to deal with this once again when it goes up to $15 an hour.
Oh, well, I'm really looking forward to that. Thank you. Any other questions of staff? I have just one before I get to the motion, Aaron or Yakov. On page 4, second to last, well, the first paragraph under the conclusion, it says, about halfway down, the overwhelming majority of students hired by Norfolk County live in Norfolk County. Do we have anything in writing in our policy that says Norfolk County students first? I would be very troublesome to respond to a concern that one of our potential student hirees in Norfolk County didn't get a job when students from other counties did. That's my only comment on this. I don't want to get into debate to it, but that would, to me, not seem something that I could defend, especially if the person was a good worker. Thank you. I just wanted to ask that question and something to think about. Any other questions? Moved by Councillor Oliver and seconded by Councillor Black. This staff report, ECS 18-02. This is minimum wage increase for students that we receive as information, and that Norfolk County Council authorized staff to recruit for the 2018 summer student group, utilizing the wage information as outlined in option 2 of this report, and further that the 2018 proposed levy-supported budget be reduced by $89,200 as per option 2 of this report. Any further discussion? If not, those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. I want to say to staff, thank you for an excellent report. I think we've had more discussion on student and summer employment and wages in the last couple of months than we have probably in years. So I think certainly I have learned a lot from this discussion. And I think you've done a great job bringing forward these options. Thank you for your hard work on that. Just my comments for what they're worth. Okay, that's it for staff reports. I know that our public meeting is scheduled for 5, so we're not going to go to section 11. Are there any reports of council members to bring forward that sit on committees? So we'll check off number 12 of the agenda. I'm going to skip over bylaws for a moment. Maybe I don't have to. Oh, the Cooper drain is on there for the first and second reading. Talk to me, go ahead, sorry. Okay, I agree. Yeah, as soon as I saw Cooper there, I thought, yeah. And of course, the official plan, yeah, I see that now. Let's go to motions, page 177. On page 177, you see a resolution proposed by Councillor Height. I have a mover for this to get it on to the floor for discussion. I'll need a seconder to get this on the floor. Councillor Geisens. And Councillor Height, if it's okay with you, I'd like to read it and then I'll open for discussion. Thank you, sir. It's been moved by Councillor Height and seconded by Councillor Geisens that the Chief Administrative Officer be directed to present Council with options for appointing an external planning consultant, and that, as Council desires to directly review and appoint an external planning consultant, they authorize the Chief Administrative Officer to present options and processes that would require the waiving of normal procurement processes and purchasing procedures, and that the Chief Administrative Officer present a budget estimate for the provision of an external planning consultant, and that the external planning consultant is to perform a review of the county's official plan and other matters that may be assigned by council for a term not to exceed the 2018 calendar year, and further, that the external planning consultant is to report independently and to be overseen directly by the Chief Administrative Officer. Councillor Height, please, if you wish.
Thank you, Mayor Luke. This goes hand in hand with the staff report that will be coming forward. And basically, I guess what I want to say, our motto at Norfolk County is open for business, okay? I'm hearing from the businesses in the development community that in fact we are not open. The sign's put away, the lights off, the blinds are pulled. I've heard from probably either 10 businesses or developers in the last 3 months that it's very, very difficult to do business in Norfolk County. Planning applications are painfully slow, just in general. And these people, Mr. Mayor, they have dreams of their businesses or they have plans to expand. We know at this council how it's been for some manufacturers here, some fertilizer places. You know, I really feel it's a problem. The council here is very supportive of our businesses and developers, and yet it doesn't seem that we're the ones coming from the top, pushing down, saying this is what our community wants. And that's one of the biggest problems. I don't have a ton of development in my area because a lot of people, quite frankly, they've given up. But I do receive calls from all around Norfolk County, and I'm sure you guys must too because they're in your wards. And they're calling and they're asking to open up business opportunities and free up some of the things. We know lot swaps have been a problem, bunkhouses have been a problem. Just in general, business itself has been a problem. And in speaking with some other planners outside of the county, I feel that this is the solution, that we hire an outside consultant. And there will be costs associated with that, Mr. Mayor. Absolutely, it's not free, but whatever we can open up for businesses, we're going to get back in tax dollars once they take their occupancy or once it's increased on the certain assessment. We're going to get the development fees. It would probably take a few months to pay for this and takes the pain away from our businesses. It takes months and months and months now. And when I look at our official plan that's coming forward, I think site plan control, I think, was in there either 9 more times than it ever was before. And if council really feels that site plan control is a way to open for business, you know, we have a fundamental problem there because the site plan control alone could take 7 or 8 months to process. In that time, a lot of people, the smaller businesses, you've missed that opportunity. It's $2,000. That's a barrier to entry right there. $2,000 right out of the gate, right? And now we even have a user fee. It's $250 if you want to talk to a planner. Just talk. Is that open for business in Norfolk County? I don't think it is, Mr. Mayor, and that's why I'm presenting this report. And hopefully I get council support. I just received those complaints far too often, and I'm looking to fix it right now. This is the time. It's our official plan review. And you shouldn't have to have an official plan amendment a month after the official plan goes into play, and I'm pretty sure there will be a good-sized list right after that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Block?
Well, I think if we were to adopt this, it would backfire on the whole idea of open for business because it would put off our current official plan process probably for at least another year and add more costs. And what I hear from the general public is they don't want more costs and they don't want more consultants. And we've already hired a consultant to do the official plan. We're going to hire another consultant on top of a consultant. And what do we expect? It's like, you know, my fellow colleague, if we can't get what we want on this consultant, let's try another one until we get, you know, and another one until we get what we want. Well, I'm sorry, but, you know, we are, whether you agree or not, And there's many things that I don't agree with in the official plan, in zoning bylaws, and some of those things you can't do anything about them because you're constrained by the provincial policy statement. And what can we do about that? Will another consultant be able to solve that if you call it a problem? Some people do not call it a problem. It adds another level of checks and balances. When you look at, you have to look at, when you're doing planning, not just one aspect, not just business. Of course it's important, but you also have to look at the social issues and the environmental issues, and I don't hear any of that being said, but those are things that need to be balanced in an official plan. And I'm afraid if you were to have this done, you're going to end up with the same results as what we have here today. So I don't see it advancing the stakes. I see it as holding us back. Will not support it and ask for a recorded vote.
Councillor Columbus?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I see in the last paragraph here, it mentions that this would be overseen directly by the Chief Administrative Officer. And I'm just wondering, to him, is there a different way to resolve the issue that Mr. Councillor Height is speaking of? We've all heard hiccups in the development community. The mayor and I were at a meeting with a couple people late last year. So I just wonder, is there a different way, CAO, that we can address this issue and come up with the same solution without delaying things and without spending more money on consultants?
Mr. Gribbs?
Last year, this council made a difficult decision to invest in our planning and development process. You will recall you approved, firstly, the hiring of 4 human beings, 1 in GIS, in planning and in development engineering, 2 there. It's only this month, now roughly 10 days ago, that we actually managed to get all 4 human beings on board and employed at this corporation. So we have like 10 days of data with this new system. We have physically moved people from Delhi into you also approved a departmental realignment within a division, for one division to another. In response to unprecedented, an all-time high demand for services from that area with respect to, and that takes in planning, that takes in development, it takes in both sort of aspects of that sort of basic field of endeavor. To directly answer your question, sir, we haven't had, or we've only had 10 days with the new team in place and starting to do their work. What I would like to suggest to this council, if you're looking for an alternative, is give it 6 months, give it 9, give it some period of time. We're going through some growing pains, obviously. No one, I include myself, I've been here 9 months as of today. I'm probably better at this now than I was 9 months ago, right? Like everyone learns when they're brand new to both to an organization and to a role. I think most of us around this table have experienced that. So give this new system that you've invested time, taxpayer resources, and some amount of faith in us as a staff to deliver better outcomes. And what I would say is let them do their work and have us report back to you, have us be accountable for that, and then look at the results. And if you are unhappy with the work volume, with the work product, with the work caliber, some variant on that, then perhaps, in fact, Councillor Height's suggestion is a good one. Because that was the best solution. Mr. Baird, myself, Ms. Robbins, a whole bunch of your senior team could come up with a new sort of dedicated function, a one-stop shop. And we think this is going to work quite effectively. But it hasn't had a chance yet. And I would imagine that any review is going to look at that and say, well, this might well work, but it has no data, so I mean, you could say something positive or negative, and either way, you couldn't back it up. Not with data, at any rate. So we have our new system in place. We have a large backlog. We know you've been given the reporting, and I'll defer to Mr. Baird, who's got a better head for the figures than do I. But basically, it's unprecedented demand, which is the basis upon which you allowed us to increase our staff complement and then change our structure. And now let us react to that backlog and perform some of that work and see how effective it is. Because the complaints that it was taking a long time were valid and correct. So we've taken some steps, but now we actually need to let people have their go at it and see if this isn't going to work. I believe it is. I think we brought you a good plan, produced by a bunch of brains around the corporation. I think the team's now in place, and now I think we give people a fair shot, and then let the cards fall where they may. With that, I'd like to defer to Mr. Baird.
Anything further, Councillor Columbus? Any other, Councillor Geisens?
Sure, I hear that we're going to make some changes and everything like that. And one of the things that people have been calling me, and maybe they're not understanding it, maybe I'm not either. Basically, the problem that we're having is that we've had some people who build houses and work at Long Point and everything like that. And the scuttlebutt is that they are going to have to come to Simcoe to get a building permit. Is that part of this that we're talking about, that you just talked about?
Mr. Baird, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To clarify that, we had staff changes, as Mr. Krebs has alluded to. We've had resignations. We've had new positions that we've been staffing up. Some of those new positions created internal promotion, where existing staff have moved up into those roles. To provide proper training and to deal with the volume, we have 90% of the activity at any given time in the Simcoe, out of the Simcoe office. So there were times where we were short at the front counter, but we've always continued to provide building inspection services and planning services in Langton. We're now fully up to staff, as was suggested. Even as late as this week, our new GIS individual has now already moved out of that new position and into a planning position that was vacated by someone who held that position, who has since moved on. A challenge with wages and workload and so on. So this is what we deal with on a daily basis from a management perspective. We want to provide the best possible service we can in all our offices, but that does require on occasion moving staff around and being a little short in different areas. But we try our best, and Langton will be back to full complement very shortly.
Okay, that'll solve my problem.
Thank you. Councillor Brunton?
Thanks, Mayor Luke. Just through you to Chris while we're on it, and it's something I've been thinking about for a while, but first of all, I'll ask, did we discuss, Chris, at one point, front-ending agreements? Are your staff looking into that?
Through the mayor, front-ending agreements is a way for developers or the county to get infrastructure started before to help fast-track subdivision development and so on. It's always been there. Now with development engineering falling in my division, development and culture, we're able to streamline a little bit easier and start to get back to some of those. I know certainly your past career, Mr. Brunton, you were involved heavily in those front-ending agreements, and we look to revisit those and make sure that they're available to developers if that's the preferred route to, again, to fast-track new growth.
Okay, one of the, I just wondered if we were going to develop a policy on it, where it would be very clear to developers on how to perhaps move something ahead that's further upstream than it should be, and you know, it involves servicing, right? And I wonder, like many municipalities have that, I'm just wondering if you're looking at a policy.
Through the mayor, it's definitely in our top 5.
Okay.
It's part of, as Mr. Krebs has said, the transition from Public Works to my department, the development engineering.
Yeah.
They're concentrating on the engineering design standards and processes, as are we. We're still a body short. we expect by mid-February, but we're seeing results already. And maybe to build on the image that our our administrative officer says, we're sitting in the car, we're ready to tear down the road, and we haven't got it in drive yet. We're doing that now. And so for us to perform, give us some time.
Okay.
I can't emphasize enough, last year, 1,400 permits, $140 million in construction. Work is happening. We are open for business. Over 300 planning applications, and rarely would this council see a recommendation for refusal.
Right.
So there is activity. Granted, there are people that are frustrated, that don't understand the development process. We have to spend a considerable amount of time with them. I sat through a meeting this morning to try to get things back on track with one development, and we're getting there. Sometimes things take a little bit more time.
Okay. One of the other things that I have always been concerned about, and you can speak from experience, I guess, but many times a developer comes in, wants to do a project, and staff say, okay, we want this and this, and in addition to him doing this project, and that could be some external servicing, who knows, widening or whatever of a highway or road allowance, but granting the municipality some property, whatever it might be. And at times, once those conditions are put forward to a developer, I mean, it's all dollars and cents to them, so they decide to say, well, I'm out of here, I can't afford it. And I'm just wondering if there's some process where we as council could be involved in, and I'm not saying staff aren't doing their job, I'm just wondering if there's something where council could say, okay, no, we'll forego that road widening, or we'll forego that extra servicing that staff have asked for, and we might, as council, accept a lesser cost or alternative to move that project ahead. Do you see any benefit in that type of approach?
Through the mayor, there's a certain set of rules that everybody has to follow, and if we hold one developer to a certain standard, I think it's important to hold others to the same. But that's not to suggest that staff are treating developers or different developments not equally.
Yeah, no.
We have different sets of eyes, different reviewers, different departments, and so on. I think over the last 6 months, that's changed.
Okay.
The buck stops here,
Right.
at 185 Robinson, and we've got a team of people there that are ready, willing, and able to do that. So we can do it from the bureaucratic side, the administration, improve the process. But as an example, on a new subdivision that you'll be approving, you'll see the series of conditions that are laid out. If council chooses to waive one or lighten that requirement, you always have that privilege of doing that. But the staff will follow your approved standards to get it to that stage for your approval. So there always is that opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you.
I have read the motion. Is there any other questions or discussion? Mr. Clerk, do you want to record the votes, please?
Councillor Height.
Yes.
Councillor Geisens. Councillor Columbus.
No.
Councillor Oliver. Councillor Brunton.
No.
Councillor Black.
No.
Councillor Wells. Councillor Sonnenberg. Mayor Luke.
No.
The motion fails, is defeated 7-2.
Motion is defeated. Thank you. And Councillor Height, thank you for that resolution. My comment on this is I'm prepared to let the staff under the new organization, I'll call it that, with the 4 new hires, give them a chance to show us what they can do. And I can only encourage council, as I do, when I get a complaint from a developer or a builder or wherever, I'll tell you, I listen and I turn those concerns over to be addressed as best they can. Sometimes can't do what the developer wants. Sometimes they can make it better, and I'm confident that things will get better because we've got a tremendous volume of building permits and applications. I suspect again this year that'll have to be dealt with in a prompt time. Let's have a break till 5:05, and then we'll start our public meeting at 5:05. Thank you.